Welcome to the Cedar Falls regular City Council meeting this December 17, 2018. I now call this meeting to order. Ask for a roll call from Madam Clerk, please.
Miller.
Here.
DeBoer. Here. Cruz.
Here.
Blanford.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Wieland.
Here.
Green.
Here.
All members are present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 1, is there a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of December 3rd?
So moved. Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Any agenda revisions, Madam Clerk?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. I do have a slight revision for the council, staff, and the public. I wanted to really publicly recognize one of our staff members, just a great individual, expert at keeping the city on task, keeping me on task, and all very quietly. Although she's on Channel 15 twice a month with me, I'd like to recognize Jackie Danielson for a real nice pin that gets a little emerald green thing. I won't show, it's too small, but for 30 years of service to our city. Thank you. Woo. She's going to kill me later.
Third when you're 10.
Moving up next is a presentation from the Cedar Falls Human Rights Commission. I have Mr. Morris down for the presentation. Welcome, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, city staff, and liaison, thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight to present the annual report from the Cedar Falls Human Rights Commission for FY 2008. The work of this past year by the Commission reflects the Vision 2025 of Cedar Falls, and we stand firmly committed in helping the city to deliver that mission for the citizens of this great city. We're good stewards of the present. This past year, we provided a voice for members of this community when they feel they have been subjected to bias or other incidents that require their voice to be heard. We had one claim that was under investigation. The rest were made for referral, and our city staff and members of the commission have helped to provide an unbiased but helpful support for those individuals as needed. In addition, we've been elevating the visibility of the Human Rights Commission by attending and participating in events across the Cedar Valley, as well as participating in programs that help us to move forward as a community committed to inclusion for all. In addition to standing as good stewards of the present, we're also reaching for the future. So this past year, we began planning as a commission on hosting a series of commission-oriented, facilitated roundtable discussions with experts on a variety of human and civil rights issues across our community. We've been discussing those, and a full version of what those are going to look like is still in development, but we have been working vigilantly on those issues. Some of those areas include mental health and wellness, racial and diversity inclusion, food and housing insecurity, access and disability issues, and others. And so we plan on having active discussions with leaders in our community about how we can support and encompass the diverse needs and characteristics of this community. In addition, we've also been discussing a potential policy committee, as well as providing an active discussion about how we can just support and affirm broad inclusion for all. So we are continuing to discuss those items and be in touch with our great city leaders on delivering those things for the citizens of Cedar Falls. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Respond to any questions that you might have.
Anything from council? Thank you again. Thanks to all the folks serving on the commission. Thank you. Greatly appreciate it. Moving on to item 2 is a public hearing on the proposed amendment number 5 to the Downtown Development Area Urban Renewal Plan. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Item B, any written communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before I open up for the public hearing, we'll hear from Shane Graham on a brief background on this public hearing.
Thanks, Mayor. So what's before council tonight is amendment number 5 to the Downtown Development Urban Renewal Plan. If council remembers, they adopted amendment number 4 about a year ago to include a project for the mill race. Entrepreneurship Center. This amendment number 5 is to add one project to the plan. It's for the downtown visioning and zoning code update that we recently sent out our request for proposals for that staff is currently reviewing. In order to utilize urban renewal funds to pay for that, it has to be in the plan. And so that's what we're doing tonight, adding just that project plan. This isn't expanding any of the area of the urban renewal areas, just adding the one project. We did follow all the code requirements and held a consultation meeting with the taxing entities. There were no comments for that, and so we're looking for approval tonight.
Thank you, Shane. I will now open up for public comment. Anyone here wishing to speak on the public hearing? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jim Skane, 2215 Clay Street. The only question I have applies to the description that is in 3, which is the approving resolution, and actually it applies also to the description in 5, and that is that it says something that I don't think is true. For example, it says that it was a blighted area and rehabilitation, conservation, redevelopment. I don't think downtown was ever a blighted area. And certainly the area out that is developed in 5 was never blighted. So I think that there's, a little bit of lacking of honesty. Obviously, I'm glad that the work is going on to make the Main Street area strong, but I am really a little concerned that the City Council goes on and argues that it was ever a blighted area.
Thank
And
you.
the same thing about 5.
Anyone further for public comment? Hearing and seeing none, I'll declare the hearing closed. Shane, back to you briefly. I think I asked this question ironically early on as well. This is the description given to us by Iowa Code, is that correct?
Correct.
And so a combination hereof is also mentioned in all the rest of the different descriptions.
Correct.
Thank you. Item 3 is resolution determining an area of the city to be designated as appropriate for urban renewal projects and adopting the amendment number 5 to the downtown development area urban renewal plan. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? Mr. Burr?
I have a question. Was this being done simply so that you can move forward with your form-based zoning? Is that what you're trying to do with this?
Yes.
Well, what this does is it funds the visioning process, and then we take a look at what code amendments we should do, whether that's a form-based code, whether it's a hybrid type of code that hasn't been determined yet, and that will be determined after the visioning process in terms of what do we want to accomplish downtown. But it is leading into some potential zoning code amendments.
Anything further from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
Six voting aye, one voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 4 is a public hearing on the proposed amendment number 5 to the Cedar Falls Unified Highway 58 Corridor Urban Renewal Plan. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So move.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Any written communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. Thank you, Jackie. Again, before public hearing, I'll go to Shane for this one as well.
Thank you, Mayor. This is amendment number 5 to the Unified Highway 58 Corridor Urban Renewal Plan. What we're doing here is, if you remember back in November, City Council approved a purchase offer for approximately 200 acres of land just west of the existing Weston Viking Road Industrial Park. What we're accomplishing with this amendment is to add this area to our urban renewal plan in order to utilize TIF funding for expenditures within this area, whether it's to reimburse for the purchase of the land or the infrastructure that we'll eventually get to be able to serve this property. So we need to get this completed first before we purchase it and get it into our plan. Again, so this is adding area outside the city limits. This also did require approval from the Blackhawk County Board of Supervisors, since this land is outside the city limits at this time. The Board of Supervisors did approve that at their meeting on the 27th of November. Again, we held a consultation meeting per state code with the taxing entities. There was no one in attendance at that meeting as well. And so we're looking forward to having council approve this amendment tonight.
Thank you, Shane. Open up for public comment on this public hearing. Yes, sir. State your name and address, if you would, please.
Bruce Barrett, 6337 Viking Road. Mr. Mayor, council, and staff, my wife and I moved to Cedar Falls in 1988 and moved into our current home on Viking Road in 1996. It's an acreage on the south side of Viking Road between Production Drive and Union Road. It's within the Urban Renewal District and has been designated for economic development by adopting Amendment 5, and we are in a cluster of about 5 other acreages. In 2004, the industrial park expanded to meet our homes. At that time, we began to work with the city planner, development director, Planning and Zoning Commission, and the City Council and the Mayor to discuss our concerns and to help mitigate factors that would decrease our property values. We found that people we worked with were open to our concerns and ideas that we had. We worked well together over several months and were able to come up with satisfactory solutions such as a berm, use of zoning for light industrial on the other side of the berm from our homes, use of a deed of dedication controlling light, parking, building height, and other factors that provide a buffer for our homes from the industrial park. So now it's 2018 and the industrial park's expanding again. Only a few people who were there at the city government now were there in 2004. However, it's my hope that we can have a good working relationship with current city staff, Planning and Zoning Commission, City Council, and Mayor to move forward in the best interests of all concerned. At this time, the changes will affect my wife and me in a different way, putting our home in an urban renewal district that's designated for economic development. As we read over Amendment 5, there was something that we did not expect, and it was troubling to us. On page 80 of the packet is a section about relocation of residents, if relocation is necessary. We appreciate it also states the city does not expect there will be any relocation required of residents or business as part of the proposed urban renewal projects. However, this clause in Amendment 5 seems to make provision for it if it becomes necessary. The Iowa Legislative Guide to Urban Renewal and Tax Increment Financing says that Iowa Code 403.7 gives a municipality the power to condemn real property that it's deemed necessary for or in connection with an urban renewal project. The only exception is for agricultural land. After reading through Amendment 5 in the Legislative Guide for Urban Renewal, it does not appear that there's any mention or provision to distinguish existing residential properties from the land that will be developed. Our current city government may not have any plans to use our property in connection with the urban renewal project and thus relocate us. However, mayors, councils, commissions change with time, and that concerns us. Please consider your own feelings if your house were placed into an urban renewal district with a clause in writing that makes provision to relocate your family if the city deems it necessary. I would respectfully request that the vote on Amendment 5 be tabled in order to have dialogue with city staff, commission, or council members about finding a way to put into writing some protection for our homes in the future. Thank you for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Verdon. Anyone further public comment? Yes, Mr. Michael.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, my name is Michael Hager. I live at 6830 Viking Road. We've had a couple neighborhood meetings at our home, which included around 20 or more of the properties surrounding the proposed expansion of the industrial park. This is the clear majority of those properties being impacted. While I am not a spokesperson for the neighbors, I do have the sense that many of us have similar thoughts as it relates to the industrial park expansion. The city of Cedar Falls has a track record of being forward-thinking about many things, including the industrial parks. This approach to planning provides for a high quality of life and robust economic development for Cedar Falls. It is one thing to plan, it is another thing to implement those plans. In the past, rather than simply set aside property for an industrial park, Cedar Falls has invested in building out the infrastructure, thereby positioning Cedar Falls to be nimble and responsive and take advantage of opportunities when presented. This has produced a diverse number of businesses and strengthened the economy of Cedar Falls. Cedar Falls has demonstrated that in addition to planning well, it also implements well. Because of the positive impacts of the industrial parks to the quality of life in our community, I support the expansion of the industrial park. The thoughtful planning that Cedar Falls uses is to be commended. The balanced approach to individual citizens and collective good of the community is no easy task, but through citizen engagement, challenging as it is sometimes, Cedar Falls serves as a role model for other government entities. While I am supportive of the expansion, there are two items I would like to bring to your attention for discussion and thought. The first involves the TIF district. Tax increment financing is a powerful tool that can have both positive outcomes and sometimes unintended consequences for a community. I believe Cedar Falls is a city that is responsible with how it utilizes tax increment financing, and we are a better, stronger community for it. As we have heard from Dr. Barradin, including residential property with the ability of TIF to relocate residents is worth a conversation. While the current council and current planning staff may not intend to relocate residents, by including residential property in the TIF district, it opens the door for others in the future to force residents out of their homes. If that is not the intention of Cedar Falls, I encourage you to remove those possibilities from the TIF documents. The second item I would like to bring to your attention relates to the future land use map. As you know, on this map, industrial areas are represented as purple, and low-density residential, or R1, is represented as yellow or gold. While purple and gold are normally a great combination for this community, in this case, with future industrial butting up against single-family homes, that's also worthy of a conversation. There are many ways for a city to buffer the industrial and single-family homes. One of the most common methods utilized by cities is through land use or different zoning. That is not the case here, so alternative methods will need to be considered. Good news for us neighbors is that Cedar Falls has already demonstrated responsiveness when establishing the eastern portion of the industrial park in 2004. At that time, the city worked diligently with the neighbors to provide multiple methods to buffer the impact to homeowners. These methods included physical barriers, distance, restrictive deed of dedication, thoughtful traffic flow, and others. We are appreciative of those previous responses, as many of them have worked. The city has a good planning staff, and we have already experienced responsive communication from the team. We have confidence in the planning staff's ability to appropriately buffer the industrial park and the single-family residences. We look forward to working with the city staff. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hager, appreciate it. Anyone further for public comment this evening? Ms. Leeson?
My name's Lisa Skubel. I'm with the Greater Cedar Valley Alliance and Chamber. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I echo the gentleman's comments on how thoughtful and attractive City Falls has become over the last 2 decades. And I've had the opportunity to work in an economic development capacity, helping existing businesses expand and recruiting new ones to the communities that we represent. I've always thought that Cedar Falls has been very thoughtful with the type of business growth occurring in the industrial park, and that is to be commended. I feel the city has been a good manager of that growth, even to the point turning down some project leads because staff didn't think it was conducive to the industrial park. I really see the city continue to be a good manager of the growth of the industrial park in the future. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lisa, appreciate it. Anyone further for a public comment? Yes, sir.
My name is Nathan Nebby at 2027 South Union Road. I'm not going to obviously cover what some of my neighbors have said already. They've done a very good job, so I'm very appreciative of them. I am just going to mention that the situation of my parents, our family land, is a little bit different than theirs because it is 22 acres and it lies within the TIF district. Over the last actually 35 years, we have been developing that area in such a way that we're trying to, or actually have, reestablished native ecosystems. So looking at native prairie as well as hardwood, timber, and actually developed a couple of ponds, one of which is more wetland. So while we have been told, and obviously I have no reason to doubt, that our land is not sort of within the sights of the industrial park expansion, of course, we do have concerns that I think are a little different with respect to the development we have taken into account over the years, for instance, the hydrology of the area. So building out, for instance, the wetland and larger pond that we have, thinking about thinking about waterfowl as well as other birds and animals, taking into account what could change with respect to the whole dynamics of the area now that it will in fact become industrial, that does concern us. So we're just kind of in a gray area that obviously does make us a little concerned. Not worried, but a little concerned. And so, if these are things that could be clarified, I know that you haven't even purchased the land yet. However, I anticipate that probably that will not be a problem given what I know. So that's all, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it. Anyone further for public comment? Hearing and seeing none, I'll declare the hearing closed. Item 5 is a resolution determining an area of the city to be an economic development area and adopting the amendment number 5 to the Cedar Falls Unified Highway 58 Corridor Urban Renewal Plan. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Open it up for further discussion from council. Mr. Boer?
Just a question, the relocation part of this clause, was that in there for the protection of the residents more than for the city?
We have staff on that? Shane.
Well, that language is common. I mean, it's in all of our urban renewal plans. I guess I'm not really 100% sure if it's a
80.
protective for the residences or not, but it's just standard wording that's in the plan. And now it doesn't give us any other ability to go out and take homes. Obviously, there's other processes that other state codes that we would have to follow. This doesn't give the city the authority to go out and acquire homes or condemn homes for that matter.
Anything further from Mr. Blanford?
Shane and Karen, are we confident that we're able to work with the property owners to mitigate some of their concerns?
Yes, yeah, and I've had numerous conversations with even several of the folks that spoke here tonight, either by phone or by email, and indicated that we would like to have a couple probably neighborhood public meetings. Eventually, we're real early in this process. As I've noted, we haven't closed on the properties yet. We won't be doing that until mid-January. And so I've already indicated to several of the property owners that we would probably like to set up a meeting probably in later January after we close on the properties and start that discussion. A few of the people mentioned some of the things about berming and some landscaping and some land use restrictions. Those are all things I think we would be willing to take a look at and work with the surrounding residents with. So I feel the conversations I've had with the residents have been really positive, and I look forward to working with them on this as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Wieland?
Thank you, Mayor. We had two citizens come up and express their concerns, and they seem to have written out their arguments. I don't have a copy of that. I'd appreciate it if both of you would get your notes to the mayor so all of council can have it. My concern was, are we moving too fast? And I heard no, there'll be neighborhood meetings in the future where those issues can and will be addressed. Did I hear that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone further from council?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Merrill?
I just wanted to reiterate that I hope it sounds like we did a fair amount, or the city did a fair amount of working with residents when the first industrial park and expansion happened, and I hope we do the same. I believe the intent of this is to get a sizable amount of land for whatever business that we can entice to go in there, and I hope that we take into account the watershed comments that were made and just the natural drainage that's happening out there, because we can do some damage too. So,
Thank you. Anyone further? Hearing seeing none, this motion and second requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next is the consent calendar. The following items will be acted upon by a voice vote and a single motion without separate discussion. If someone from the council or the public requires or requests an item to be pulled for such discussion, any such requests from council? From the public? Item 7. Any further? I'll now summarize the consent calendar minus item 7. Item 6 is approve the recommendation of the mayor relative to the reappointment of Roger White to the Health Trust Fund Board. Appreciate Roger, as always, for his service to the city. Item 8 is receive and file communications from the Civil Service Commission. 9 is receive and file the FY18 annual report of the Cedar Falls Human Rights Commission. And item 10 is approving permits and licenses. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar minus item 7?
So moved.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 7 reads, receive and file the City Council goal-setting report of November 14th and of November 15th, 2018. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Open it up for discussion from council. From the public?
My concern with number 7 is that the meeting that these goal-setting activities took place was in violation of the open meetings law. Much of the agenda is a violation of the motion open meetings law. And the reason for saying that is that it is obvious the way that this part of the agenda and the resolution calendar is put forth, that the decisions have already been made. And the open meetings law,
We're going to need to focus on the item at hand that you...
that's right, I am.
File. We need to get back to that, please.
Yeah, but this is what I'm doing, sir.
We better...
Mr. Mayor, do you understand that I'm objecting to the fact that there was a goal setting that was not a public meeting, and that makes it out of the open meetings law?
That can be brought up at public comment. This is the...
No, you're Mr.
Call you out of order, Mr. Skane.
I strongly object. I don't think you know how on point my comments are. And for you to call me out of order, you've done that before. You've had me removed.
Mr. Skane, I'm going to have you sit down if you don't continue and focus completely on receiving and file the City Council goal-setting report.
That's what I'm talking about.
Let's get there, please.
I've been talking about it, that I object to the fact that this report is being received and filed, and my reason for objecting to it is that it's in violation of the open meetings law. And I wish, Mr. Mayor, that you would learn parliamentary procedure.
Thank you very much.
You do not know it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I want to clarify something because that is absolutely not true. That meeting had members of the public in attendance, it had members of the media in attendance, it was at a public building. I don't know how we could have made it more of a public meeting. And the report of that has been prepared and is available for the public, both at City Hall and online. So it's very much in the public eye. I don't know what else we could do to make it more that way.
Thank you, Mr. Blanford. It's been motion and second. Any further discussion from council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next is the resolution calendar. The following items will be acted upon by a roll call vote on a single motion without separate discussion. Unless someone from the council or the public requests an item to be pulled separately for discussion, any such requests from council?
Mr. Mayor, number 16 and 15, please.
16 and
15.
15? 15 and 16? Okay, thank you. Anyone further from council? From the public? Mr. Skane?
11, 12, 17, 19, 20, 21, 23.
Anything further from the public?
Can we get a recap of those, please?
I have down 11, 12, 15, 16 from Councilman Green, 17, 19, 20, 21, 23 from the public.
Can I also ask for 18, please? I know I'm out of line.
18, okay.
Yes.
think I'll briefly summarize the resolution calendar minus all those we just mentioned. Item 13 is a resolution approving and adopting revised job classifications. 14 is approving and authorizing execution of 3 leases relative to property vacated by the 2008 flood buyout programs. Item 22 is approving and authorizing execution of an informal project contract for demolition in conjunction with the Northern Cedar Falls Flood Buyout Program. 24 is setting January 7th as a date of public hearing on amendments to the city's FY19 budget. 25 is setting January 7th as a public hearing on the proposed rezoning from A1 to R1 of property located to the north of Arbors Drive and west of Richard Road. Is there a motion to approve the resolution calendar minus those items pulled?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second requires a roll call vote, please.
A voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to, I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to mention those that were pulled by council, and then we'll come back to those as far as what the public is concerned. I believe item 15, it reads resolution approving and adopting the recommendation of the Parks and Rec Commission relative to a recreation fee schedule to become effective April 30th. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion second. Any comments, Mr. Green?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I move to amend the recreational fee schedule in the interest of transparency to include the significantly reduced rates for city staff and elected officials.
There's an amendment?
Yes, sir.
A motion to amend?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there's been a motion to amend from Mr. Green. Is there a second? That item fails for lack of a second. Anything further from council? The motion and second requires a roll call vote, please. Mr. Whelan? A roll call vote on item 15.
A voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 16 reads a resolution approving and authorizing placement of a sculpture near the main entrance to City Hall as requested by the Cedar Falls Public Art Committee and of the Art and Culture Board. Is there a motion,
To
please?
approve?
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just wanted to have clarification on who's expected to fund the memorial project. Is this a city project or is this a private funds?
Does staff have anything on that? We have some, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rep.
Mr. Green, this project's been talked about at the Public Art Committee level at this point. Some of the discussions were that this overall project may be $20,000 to $25,000, and the Public Art Committee has at least informally indicated the use of some of their hotel motel dollars towards the project, maybe up to $10,000. Obviously, these are just discussions at this point. The Art and Culture Board has not approved those expenditures, nor has the City Council. So typically what happens in situations like this, we do partner with the private sector. In this group actually is the John Cruz family. They indicated that they'd like to go out and raise maybe $10,000 to $15,000 towards the project. In the past, the city has paid for the footing. That might be anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500, and then Public Art or the city sometimes take care of the lighting. So all that information will be made available as this project moves forward for City Council to consider the expenditure of those funds.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion from council? Requires a roll call vote, please. Bring up in public comment. Sorry about that. I can ask next time. Not now. Not now. We all had a motion and a call to vote.
A voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item number 18, it reads a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a resource enhancement and protection grant agreement development with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources relative to the Clay Street Park Water Quality Improvement Project. Is there a motion, please?
Second.
Motion second for discussion for council.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I was just hoping for some background info, and then as well, I'm interested how we moved Main Street out, and I thought there was impact from this area on Main Street construction potentially. Curious about the timelines for that.
Well, this project is connected a little bit with the drainage studies that we're wanting to get started and have in our CIP now. So this area does then drain. There's quite a significant amount of drainage coming from the roads and from the neighborhoods that then does go downstream and would connect into the Main Street project. So The drainage studies that we're getting ready to start will help us know for sizing with the Main Street project. But in the meantime, we've been looking at this area for a while because the neighbors have expressed concern about the drainage coming through the park.
Thank you.
Anything further from council? From the public? Hearing and seeing none, there's a motion and a second on the table. This requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving back to item 11 is a resolution establishing the 2019 pay for the City of Cedar Falls elected officials in compliance with the city's code of ordinances. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? From the public?
Is there a public document that tells you what those increases will be? And could that be talked about now so we know what they are?
Your question will be noted until you're done speaking.
See, Mr. Mayor,
We better stay on track, Mr. Skeen.
I am staying on track. You're not. You're not staying on
Mayor?
track, but you...
Yes.
If I may, can I address the speaker, or I'll address
Prefer
you?
not.
I would.
Thank you.
I guess I'm all for open dialogue and what, everybody is allowed to have their comments, but I don't appreciate speakers raising their voice to you or disregarding your direction.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I appreciate that. Anything further, Mr. Skeen, on item 11?
Yeah. Oh, you have not, maybe you'll never answer it as to what those pay increases are,
Thank you.
because you have ignored them in the past, almost universally.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
can we get some staff comment on the document that's in the council packet addressing this comment?
In the binder right there, too.
It's in the binder for the public notice.
Page
Anyone can.
131, would that be the same as what's online if someone wants to look?
Online, they can have it emailed to them, or they can look in this book or call city staff anytime.
Okay, it's page 131.
Thank you. Anything further from council? From the public? Been motion second, requires a roll call vote, please.
Can we have staff address that?
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, Mark.
That's
Sure,
fine.
Jennifer.
Sure, so in your packet, it shows, in our ordinance, we have where the increases for elected officials are in accordance with the CPI, the most recent annual CPI inflation index. And so what it shows is that for the calendar year, the most recent one last December, it was 2.1%. So for the elected officials, that will go into effect that for council and mayor, the 2.1% increase.
In July.
January 1st.
January 1st. Okay, beg your pardon. Thank you.
If I may, what does that amount to, 2%?
So
For a council
person, you will now get approximately $11 more per month
Thank you.
for that.
Anything further from council? Motion second, requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 12 is approving and adopting the FY20 City Council goals and objectives. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? From the public?
It's the same point. Isn't this the implementation of the receive and file those reports from the goal setting? And if it is, then I certainly would like to hear something about the resolution, because I don't think many people here know what those goals are, except the people, the council, maybe whoever else attended that non-advertised public meeting.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Yes.
Within that item for resolution approving and adopting the goals and objectives, that document is included in the council packet for review, and it would be impossible to do every item on the agenda as a detailed discussion. I mean, that's why we have the council packets ahead of time. So I respectfully ask to be able to vote on this.
Yep, very good. It's been, any further discussion from council? The motion second requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 17 is approving and authorizing execution of purchase agreements, utility agreements, grading easements in conjunction with the West First Street reconstruction project. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council, from the public? Hearing and seeing none, this requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 19 is approving and accepting a lien notice in special promissory note relative to the rental to single-family owner conversion incentive program. Is there a motion, please?
So
Mr.
moved.
Mayor,
Been motion.
Second.
if I may,
Please.
prior to that, can we include 19, 20, and 21 all as one vote?
I was going to. I just thought we'd break it down and see what happens. It's been motion second for 19. Any discussion from council? Public?
I concur with Mr. Miller that 19, 20, and 21 deal with the same issue. And so I think that they could be voted on as one. But the point that I make is that I remember the very strong controversy about this landlord moratorium that we had, where people couldn't, without paying the fee, allowed to change to a from single tenant to a rental property. And in this, it now says that you have that program to change properties back to single-family conversion with an incentive. Now, it seems to me that if there is a change back to single-family, there certainly should not be an incentive to do so. I see no reason for an incentive. And I'd ask another question, which I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, you won't answer, is what is the current incentive? But I agree with Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Skeen. Is there any further comment from public council? Mr. Blanford?
I just want to clarify this program. It's designed as a forgivable loan to individuals who are purchasing what is a rental property and converting it back into their primary residence. I think it's been very successful. It's allowed some younger families to actually move back in or stay in the community, which I think is a goal of ours. And I've been very proud of the results. It's a fairly small incentive, but it does maybe push things in that direction, and I'm very proud of the work we've done with it.
Thank you, Mr. Blanford. Any other further discussion from council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd also note, especially living downtown, the huge advantages to curb appeal of the entire neighborhood. So it's not just this homeowner that benefits, it's the entire community.
Thank you. Anything further from the public? In motion, second requires a roll call vote for item 19, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 20 and 21 is approving and accepting a lien notice special promissory note for property for the rental to single-family owner conversions incentive program. Is there a motion for 20 and 21, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further comment? Roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 23 is approving and authorizing execution of a supplemental agreement relative to the 2019 engineering services. Is there a motion, please?
I'll move.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? From the public?
I notice I didn't get an answer on my incentive question. What is the incentive? But on this one, before he starts to roll me out of order, on this one I say that I read in the paper about $300,000 being appropriated, and this everybody is approving and authorizing that Snyder would have 2 representatives, engineers, one housed in City Hall, and the cost is $300,000 for 6 months. It seems to me that there's a clear conflict of interest if you are hiring an engineer and the engineering services for a very expensive project that is coming up, the roundabouts on on Green Hill. And I think I'm correct in all that I have said, but it seems to me that it's not really ethical. It really is not ethical.
Appreciate it. Any further comment from the public? The motion second requires a roll call vote, please.
If we can have staff give some background on this once again.
You want background again on this item 23?
I know we went over this at the last council meeting, but just to offer some background, there's an ethics accusation here. So if we've got some background on what we're doing and the $300,000 number.
Sure, that's fine. Staff, would you please address this again?
At the last council meeting, when we talked about the contract for engineering services, it was a general contract to help us with a variety of projects and issues, as we have a lower engineering staff and have for quite some time. And then we indicated that there might be some larger projects where we would bring forward individual contracts as those occurred. And so this is one of those with the Parkade project with the brick repair that we need larger services. And we always had in our CIP design services identified in fiscal 19 and then moving into the project in fiscal 20 and beyond. And there may be projects after this that the council will be asked to consider a separate contract as those come forward. We went through a selection process before we brought forward the contract last time, and we evaluated a number of firms before we brought forward the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion from council? Mr. Blanford?
Just to clarify, Director Sheets, just to put it in the simplest of terms, we're basically contracting out some additional staff time because we don't have the resources to meet all of our project demands.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Been motion second requires a roll call vote, please.
It's registering.
Yes.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 26, is there a motion to allow bills and payroll?
So moved.
Motion second requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. City Council, have any referrals this evening?
I apologize, I forgot one element of a question that was asked earlier. Director Sheets, can you give us the amount of the forgivable loan program?
Yep. Yes, in the staff memos related to those projects, it indicated that the maximum award is $10,000 per project.
Thank you.
And it's all outdoor obvious kinds of improvements like new windows and siding and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Visible.
It's also $100,000 a year, if I'm not mistaken, is the maximum.
That's what we have budgeted in our CIP, so it could fund up to 10 projects a year.
Thank you.
No other referrals? Any updates from council? I believe Dr. Olson has an update this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 updates, if you wouldn't mind. So as we approach the end of this calendar year, I just wanted to share a little stats with you on the police and fire side. We certainly have good news to report so far this calendar year. Through the end of November, I'd like to report that crime is down 10% in the city, with 1,900 crimes reported. The crime classifications that are down the most are assaults and thefts. We did have an uptick in alcohol-related offenses, but overall we're down 10%, which is certainly good news. Arrests are up about 7%. Calls for service are up slightly at about 1,500. And we got similar good news on the fire front. Fire calls remain low at 5 serious structure fires this year. The majority of fire calls are the fire division assisting Sartori paramedics on those medical calls. And calls for service and fire are down with a total of 1,600 calls. We certainly got some good news to report. And in January, we'll be reporting the end of the year stats to you, so I think we'll certainly have some good news there. The second update has to do with the cancer fundraising efforts that the police and fire individuals have been involved with. As you may recall, they joined forces to sell the pink patches this year. And I think we'll have some graphics for you. There's some of the pink patches there you'll see on your screen. And they also striped a squad car with pink as well. And they did that with the intent of donating the proceeds to the Beyond Pink Team, which is a volunteer group in the Cedar Valley that helps cancer victims and families locally. And after they sold the patches and paid for their expenses, they presented the Beyond Pink Team with $3,900. So I just want to congratulate those police and firefighters that contribute their time, efforts, and ideas to that great cause.
Thank you, Director. It was a great event. Moving on to public forum. Speakers will have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. Is there anyone here from the public that'd like to speak this evening? Dr. Young, you can come first if you'd like. You're right there.
Nice and handy. Mr. Mayor, City Council members and staff, thank you for this opportunity. I have just a brief statement and then a question to address to all of you. On the 8th of October of this year, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, released a special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees centigrade. This report was based on more than 6,000 scientific references and reviewed by 91 authors and editors from 40 different countries in the world. So the science is sound. The key message from this report is that we already are seeing the results of 1 degree centigrade increase in global temperatures that are resulting in more extreme weather, as we've seen, rising sea levels, and melting Arctic sea ice. They further conclude, and I quote, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade compared with 2 degrees centigrade would reduce challenging impacts on ecosystems, human health, and well-being. According to Deborah Roberts, who is the co-chair of the IPCC Working Group 2, and I quote again, the decisions we make today are critical in ensuring a safe and sustainable world for everyone now and in the future. And I further quote from her, the next few years are probably the most important in our history. So an important issue. My question is this. What plan does Cedar Falls have to ensure a sustainable future of reduced carbon emissions? And if you choose not to act, how will you answer your grandchildren when they ask, why, when given the opportunity, didn't you do more? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young. I will open up for council to comments from the previous speaker. Frank?
It's my understanding, Mr. Mayor, that in the near future, we're going to be meeting with Eric Giddens from University of Northern Iowa. He has already, I believe, done some sort of study of the city of Cedar Falls as to what our carbon footprint currently is, and will give us some suggestions, I believe. Again, I haven't been to the meeting yet, but it's my understanding he provides some suggestions for cities how they can reduce their carbon footprint. And so it's a first step. You know, we are doing some other things as far as water quality and that kind of thing, but and I think we've purchased more efficient vehicles over the years, but I'm anxious to have this meeting with Dr. Giddens to find out more specifically what we might do. That's one thing.
Just to echo Councilman Dara, Councilman Dara, myself, and a couple others have been attending a working group that you and I have been putting on from surrounding communities to talk about this issue. There's been representatives from Waterloo, Waverly,
Board of Supervisors.
Board of Supervisors. So it's an ongoing discussion. I know there'll be some more information coming, but it is something that we take very seriously and have been looking at.
Anything further from council?
Mr. Mayor, I can speak on behalf of some of the things that you and I have been doing on campus as well.
Sure.
I know that we have the Center for Energy and Environmental Education, if I'm remembering the name correctly, as well as the RTTC, who have been working pretty tirelessly on campus to try and help improve recycling, which we've seen go up in our student union. We've also seen a lot more students biking and walking as much as they can, despite some of the bitter Iowa cold that we experience. And a part of that has to do with the fact that, well, it's cheaper to bike than it is to buy gas, but it is also more energy efficient. And I think a lot of students are trying to take steps in that direction. We've also seen a lot of students starting groups to do things like upcycle books, or recycle other materials. I know there was one group that was started recently with the goal of recycling old classroom materials into new crafts that future educators can use in their classrooms. So we have students working tirelessly across campus to try and do little things that they can to improve, but hopefully the UNI community, we're trying to really train our students to go into the workforce with this mindset of trying to work to improve the global climate and try and reduce the impacts of climate change overall. And I think that's going to be the best thing that we can do from the UNI perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Madden.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just add too that with our zone or form-based zoning discussions that we'll be having, part of that is the idea of mixed-use development and changing our footprint as much as possible to make it more efficient to do things without having to use a vehicle. So I'm personally looking forward to seeing those discussions happen in the next couple of months to see how we can reduce those needs for automobiles.
Very good. There's another one. Yes, sir. Behind. Come on up, please. Just state your name and address for us.
Good evening. My name is Jack Yates, and I live at 519 Chateau Court in Cedar Falls, and I also have some comments to make about climate change. My family and I have been very concerned about climate change for quite some time. You know, we've known about climate change and the detrimental effects it was having on the planet since the mid-'80s. In 1991, we built an energy-efficient house because of concerns about our energy use. And when we could afford to, we added active solar hot water and solar electricity. And the most recent thing we did was to buy an electric car and add on more PV to furnish us with zero carbon transportation. Our goal eventually is to have a zero carbon emission home and lifestyle. The situation is dire. It really is an emergency. And as Jim mentioned, the recent report from the International Panel on Climate Change is dire. And there's also a national climate assessment put together by the United States government. And what it shows was that if we don't act now, we're going to suffer, we're going to pay more for abatement, for dealing with all the effects of climate change than we would pay now if we went green. So the world needs to, according to these reports, the world needs to do something in the next 10 or 12 years just to keep things from getting much worse. Now, I know that some people are still skeptical, but Mars is not skeptical. Now, I'm not referring to the planet, I'm referring to the candy company. They're already having trouble getting enough chocolate to make their product, and so they've signed on to reduce their carbon footprint. My understanding is that most corporations have written climate change into their business plan and are doing what they can to cut their carbon footprint. Walmart is an example. It's on the list. McDonald's, Levi's Jeans. These companies have factored climate change into their business model, and they're concerned about what it'll do to their bottom line. And Iowa's already seeing the effects of climate change. I heard predictions back in the 1980s about changes in our weather patterns that would make it harder for farmers to make a crop. And those predictions made in the 80s have already come to pass. We're not dealing with something that might happen in the future, something that's not certain. We're already experiencing the effects of climate change. So I think the time for skepticism is past. And luckily, fortunately for us, public opinion is on the side of those who want to get something done. Recent polls show that Americans are willing to pay more to go green. They're willing to pay more to live in a low-carbon environment. So I have two specific requests for the city of Cedar Falls. Number one, I'd like to see us formulate a public goal for reducing our carbon footprint. And I know something of the work of Eric Giddens. He's a good start. But we need to have a public goal that we set, and then to back that up, we need a public plan for how we're going to reach that goal. So we have a reputation as a progressive city, and I think we should burnish that reputation by doing what other cities and localities have already done. Make a public goal and plan for getting there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. We're going to open it for council for any comments, previous speaker. Someone else for public comment? Penny, come on up. Oh, go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry, I didn't really raise your hand.
Mike Butler, 1022 Washington Street. Once again today, I read the supporting documents to the agenda. I would suggest anybody in the community that wants some hard study to try to read all through them in one setting, to understand them and to have acted on them. They're there, they're online anyway, and if you want to come in and get them, but there's a lot, and a kudos to all of you for taking the time to serve and to read them. I read today that we have 3 more houses, as you talked about, that are going back to single family. I live in what we call the inner city, this side of 12th Street, and we have a lot of old houses. Mine is right up there with the oldest, and it is so nice to see a house that has been returned to single family ownership where they actually move in and stay there. The police reports, unfortunately, Jeff, we don't have to call you guys for the drunks passing through and moving things around or any of that stuff. It just makes for a better neighborhood. So I don't want to hold up any more of your time, but I really am appreciative of what you do and the amount of reading and studying you have to do to be able to relate this back and forth to all the things going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Come on up, Penny. You bet.
I'm just going to back that up for just a second. This is what you folks get to deal with every weekend before council, and a few of us out here too. I've read it. You're not alone. Good evening. My name is Penny Poff. I live at 4805 South Main. Earlier at the Committee of the Whole, a presentation of the results and recommendations of the Green Hill Corridor traffic study occurred. Project costs were discussed, questions were asked, and answers given. As we look forward to the new year and discussions start about projects for the CIP, I'd like to highlight a project that should run concurrently with the intersection improvements at Green Hill and Main, slated for and funded for 2021. The wooden mitigation barrier or fence that many neighbors have on Balboa and Spruce Hills needs to be replaced. This past summer, neighbors expressed comments and concerns about the fence, and they were forwarded to the city. The fence was inspected in the fall, and it was determined that the fence should be replaced and not repaired. Funding could occur in the CIP. I'm asking City Council to approve funding for this line item in the CIP, and we're asking for a replacement structure to be built to the standards equal or better than the original. This barrier was included to mitigate the environmental impacts of Green Hill Road, and in the design, the city may want to include and protect our neighbors on South Main that are experiencing increased noise levels. Today, I dropped off letters at City Hall from property owners who benefit from this fence for inclusion in the council packet for the January 7th meeting and for the public record. And as you know, council packets run into hundreds of pages. So I brought along some copies so you wouldn't have to dig through the whole packet. So, when action is taken on the South Main and Green Hill intersection improvements, we urge the city to include fencing for a replacement fence, or funding for a replacement fence, or fencing. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
May I hand these out real quick at the end?
Just leave them there, make sure we get them afterwards.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Pop. Appreciate it. Anyone further for public comment this evening? Mr. Skane.
Skane, 2215 Clay Street. The City Council is considering whether to build more roundabouts. This time, they have before them a recommendation to build 2 roundabouts on Green Hill Road, one at South Main and another at Cedar Heights Drive. Why? If the council looks at what the 6 roundabouts that have been completed on University Avenue have done, It is clear that when the council accepted the both proposal, it became a willing partner in the process. The council accepted the both design without doing due diligence on how best to reconstruct University Avenue. It was the only design ever presented. The people repeatedly knew that roundabouts were wrong for University Avenue because roundabouts made driving on University unsafe and unreliable. But the council, over the years, refused to listen. What are the consequences of the both design and council's compliance for University Avenue? One, the city received $20 million from the state to reconstruct University Avenue. The original cost estimate was $32.5 million. Of that amount, $12.5 million was for the 6 roundabouts. Each roundabout cost an average of $2.1 million. After construction began, the cost of the both design ballooned to $40 million. It is still not clear where the additional $20 million came from, but we do know that city services have been cut and some services have been transferred to Cedar Falls Utility for people to pay. 2, the Cedar Falls section of University Avenue is no longer a corridor that it was prior to the reconstruction. It is a broken corridor. Few, if any, vehicles now travel all the way from Main Street to Midway. Some sections now have as few as 3 vehicles on them at any time of the day. The traffic count shows that fewer still travel the full length from University to Midway. Prior to the reconstruction, many of the 20,000 cars that traveled University each day traveled the full distance from Main to Midway. Now, both the local people and out-of-town people avoid University as a corridor. The both design is flawed. For example, in order to get onto the Holiday Roundabout, you have to drive through the parking lots of businesses on the north side of University and have to go to the former Idaho Road Street that is now part of College Square, that is the extension, and you have to go on that in order to access it from the south side. Why? Because University Avenue is too narrow to accommodate the width of a 2-lane roundabout.
1 minute remains, Mr. Skeen.
Okay, that's fine. To accommodate the width of a 2-lane roundabout. As a result, there is more traffic on the extension of Idaho than there is on the Holiday Roundabout to the Waterloo Road roundabout section. Now, I have other things, but there's one thing I want to make sure I say before I'm cut off, and that is that I have a note. The city will and has spent millions on a roundabout, but would not spend a few dollars to install a stop sign and make a 4-way stop intersection that was petitioned in North Cedar and in other places. A few dollars to make an intersection safe.
I'm sorry, Mr. Skeen, you're 5 minutes.
I know.
Yep,
I have one sentence. Oh, no.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Not
Anyone
even
further for public comment this evening? Very good. Wish everybody a great Christmas, otherwise happy holidays. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.